Hello everyone, my name is Bob Bowie, and this is the second video in a short kind of online course, a few video talks about liberation theology. And I've still got the notes in front on the screen that you can see that I've been writing, just a few things about the background, which included the story of, if you like, the Catholic Church's approach to councils from the Council of Trent in the 16th century and Vatican II, and how Vatican II changed things for the Church in terms of allowing for more of a diversity of expression. And so therefore, when the liberation sort of theology movement, when the Latin American bishops were getting together to try to apply Vatican II to their situation in countries that were poorer, there was this possibility of thinking about what church meant for poor countries. And I've also got this second picture here, which is a bit sort of contrasting theology in Europe, which tended to go from orthodoxy to orthopractice, from the theory of ideas to what you did, you applied, and a kind of Latin American perspective, which started with experience and practice and went to the ideas, the orthodoxy. So it kind of went the other way. And these are just references as to why liberation theologians draw on the sources of information that explain the world around. So these are the sources of information that are not just biblical. That kind of goes back to an idea which Christians have thought about for a long time. How do you get experience of God? And remember that you've got important theologians like Thomas Aquinas, who see both revelation and also reason and the world around, so making sense of the world around you, as sources for revelation. So it's possible to find out things of God from the world around you, not just from by the Bible, from revelation, or perhaps more precisely, revelation can reveal itself in nature and in your surroundings as well as in the written word of God. I also found this, which I wanted to mention because Professor Patrick Sherry was my teacher of liberation theology, and he's now retired, but he wrote this great guide by CTS on what is liberation theology, which is a short guide. You can still get hold of it online if you Google it and search, and it's just a really nice little short guide, very accessible, and at the back it has a good list of readings, including important works by Gutierrez and Boff. That's a little bit blurry, I'll just zoom in there. Jesus Christ Liberator there, and Sabrino, Christology at the Crossroads, and also the Sacred Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. So it's kind of like the theological the part of the magisterium, the part of the teaching authority that confirms what is orthodox or what is not orthodox. We'll come back to that later, because liberation theology has had a bumpy relationship with the teaching authority of the church. But I also thought I'd just read a bit from Gutierrez, this book, Theology of Liberation, just to give you a little bit of a flavour. And you can see from my copy, by the way, that it's littered with these little bookmarks. And also, I should say, by the way, in my defence, I haven't underlined this. This is I bought the second hand, and so the previous owner underlined lots of sections. Although, to be fair, I thought their underlinings was very good. So let me just say this. This is because I wanted to say something about, and let's call it the method. I mean, actually, we began talking about the method over here, talking about praxis to experience. So the method of liberation theology. How do you do it? How do you do it? And this is what Gutierrez says. The function of theology as critical reflection on praxis has gradually become more clearly defined in recent years, but it has as its roots the first centuries of the Church's life, the Augustinian theology of history that we find in the City of God, for example, is based on the true analysis of the signs of the times and the demands with which they challenge the Christian community. So this is a really straightforward idea, that a basic idea that actually this thing of critical reflection, this thing of sort of theological theology as critical reflection. So rather than theology starting with a list of propositions, but actually this idea that theology as critical reflection which means reading the signs of of the times. So being aware, that's a biblical idea, that reading the signs of the times, being aware of what's going on around you. And that has a kind of Augustinian origin in the City of God. And I've mentioned it's also got Aquinas in there too, with reason and revelation. Reason and revelation behind how we make sense of things. And this is a bit more of what Gutierrez says. I'm just going to draw a few sections from the introduction chapter, the first few pages. This is pages 6, 7 and so on. Gutierrez writes, "Charity has been fruitfully rediscovered as the centre of the Christian life." So charity, the act of charity, as a central part of Christian life. Love is the nourishment and the fullness of faith, the gift of oneself to the other, and invariably to others. But later on he goes on to say, there is a greater sensitivity to the anthropological aspects of revelation. The word of God is at the same time a promise to the world. So you've got a kind of if you thought that what theology was okay, so we've got kind of God up here in heaven, and then humanity down here on earth. And so then you think, well, okay, so what theology is the information coming down. Oops. Excuse me, I've made a bit of a muck there. Let's just do that again. My magic pen eraser. Just let that dry out for a second. So you've got God up there in heaven, and you've got humanity down here on earth. And you've got the idea that the kind of message comes down, and in between the sort of, God in heaven and God on earth, the message is being explained by, okay, so the church teaching, or the theologians. But you might say, well, where are these theologians getting their stuff from? How do they know what's going on? That's one idea of theology. That's one kind of model. And maybe we'd put the Bible in there. But then what Gutierrez is saying is no, it's something different. It's actually kind of going the other way in a sense. It's you've got to be down here on earth, and you've got to read the signs of the times, and then you act, then you express in all of your actions. So it's a sort of a liberation theology kind of model that's going in the opposite direction. It's not like facts coming down. It's actually your. In fact, you could say it's not even that kind of picture, because it's not God up there in heaven. God is speaking to you here through the signs of the times. Maybe this is what's happening, and you're seeing it from your perspective down here. You're actually seeing it around you. And so this is where Gutierrez says there is no horizontalism kind of in this approach. It's simply of the question of the rediscovery of the unity of man and God. So Gutierrez is kind of saying we've got to kind of change this model. That's not going to work. What we've got to say is that humanity and God are there, and to see God, we've got to read the signs of the times around us, and that is kind of how we can make sense of God. So I've got a little kind of arrow zooming around there like that. We perceive through the signs of the times God's presence. So it's a different model. It's a completely different model of theological reflection. Okay. And this means, so if we're going to make sense of the signs of the times, well, how do we do that? How do we interpret what's going on around us? We're going to need to use our reason for this. We're going to need to make sense of the things that we can see around us. So that's why we're gonna draw on all of the people and all of the kind of sciences and social sciences that help make sense of the things around us, because that's the application of our reason to make sense. God reveals in history. So you've got the story of God revealing himself to Abraham and to Moses and to all of the folk in the Hebrew scriptures, or as Christian people call it, the Old Testament, and then through the humanity of Jesus as well. So you've got God revealing in history in those biblical times, and the liberation theologians coming in saying, yeah, that's exactly what happens now. God reveals himself through us, through history. So when we encounter poverty, when we encounter injustice, when we encounter oppression, when we encounter structures around us, experiences and interests of what is wrong, then we are encountering God in those moments. Accessing God is not some sort of other connection, some sort of weird spiritualized sort of notion of communication, like God way up there, a long way away from us. It's not a renouncing, if you like, of seeing God in the world around us. God is speaking to us in that world around us. So that's just a little bit on a really short piece on the method of liberation theology. And in the next video, I'm going to say a little bit more about some of the key ideas and also some of the key thinking of Gutierrez in liberation theology.